So there you are, so excited to play Cynthia's Garchomp EX, ready to tank some damage at 400 HP total. Then your opponent jungle dumps you, doing an insane 480 damage for knockout due to weakness. Weakness is the rock, paper, scissors of the Pokemon TCG. Hitting for big numbers due to weakness feels great, but you know what feels even better? Hitting for 4 times weakness instead of 2 times. And thanks to Kabutops from 151, I was able to construct a deck that would hopefully be able to pit almost any deck against their weakness, if I could get all the pieces in place. Will Kabutops rise to the Kabutop and be a meta champion? Or is it a Veluza loser? This is the 825 Deck Challenge. Rumor has it that every like and subscriber this week counts as 4 times due to Kabutops, so make sure to do your part if you haven't already. Happy New Year's, folks, the first new deck of 2026. And man oh man was this process fun today. As always, I was determined to make this week's wheel selected Pokemon work, and on paper, Kabutops seems strong, with its Ancient Way ability that turns weakness modifier to 4 times instead of 2 times. I had to give a lot of thought to what deck I'd pair with it though, because without the ability to know what type my opponent would be running, your typical deck centered around 1 or 2 Pokemon types was not going to work here. At first I thought of a Terra Box-like deck, but 2 prizers who already hit for a decent amount would likely not really benefit from Kabutops' ability. I was looking for a single prize deck that really played off of types, and that's when I decided to give the Phantasmal Flames Paldean Taurus a spin. We've actually had a couple of Paldean Tauruses throughout the past sets, with a fighting, water, and fire variant, and I'm actually going to break some format here and say things went really bad with this deck. So bad that after my first test match, I completely shifted gears. Realistically, the 3 types offered with the Tauruses weren't super helpful in terms of weakness matchup, and I just really hated the synergy that came from it. Also weighing on my mind was that there was an alternative that felt easier to set up, more consistent, and could really rock and roll with Kabutops' crazy 4 times modifier. I'm talking Rotom, another deck recently leveraged by Phantasmal Flames. Let me walk you through the deck. A match made in Pokemon Heaven. Kabutops, as a fossil Pokemon, comes from an item card which is a fossil, but played from hand as a Pokemon. This was my first time ever using a fossil card in a deck, and I genuinely hated this mechanic because it made setup so frustratingly difficult, as item cards can't be found off of any Pokemon search. Once put down though, you can evolve it into Kabuto, who is a stage 1 Pokemon, and then lastly the Kabutops from 151. To hit on a range of weaknesses, we had Rotom in different forms: Rotom, Heat Rotom, and Mow Rotom. All 3 of these Rotoms have an attack that for 2 colorless energy, Gadget Show, hits for 30 times for every tool attached to any of your Pokemon in play. Each of the Rotoms also have a single energy attack requiring the specific energy of their type. Rotom's Astonish hits for a base of 20 damage and reshuffles a random card from your opponent's hand. Heat Rotom's Singe burns your opponent's active Pokemon, and Mow Rotom's hit for a base of 20 and discards the active Stadium. To help these Rotoms out, I did have their king, Rotom EX, whose ability Multi-Adapter lets any Pokemon with Rotom in the name have 2 tools attached to it. This of course exists to help boost the various single prize Rotom's Gadget Show's attack. It also has an attack, Thunderbolt, that hits for 130 damage and discards all energy on Rotom EX. Now to cover Dark type and Psychic type, my Dark of choice was the Yveltal from Paradox Rift, for its 2 colorless energy attack, Crosscut, which hits for 30 damage plus 60 more if your opponent's active Pokemon is an evolution Pokemon. And my Psychic was an EX, because I felt it was too strong in this deck. Lillie's Clefairy EX, whose attack, Full Moon Rondo for 1 Psychic and a colorless energy, hits for 20 plus 20 damage for every Pokemon on yours and your opponent's bench. And its ability, Fairy Zone, that makes Dragon-type Pokemon weak to Psychic-type Pokemon, covering Dragon and Pokemon already weak to Psychic-type. So the theme here is Pokemon with 2 energy attacks, primarily colorless, to let weakness do all the talking. Now most Rotom decks are chock full of a ridiculous amount of tools, but where Kabutops helps here is that if attacking into weakness, 1 tool does the same amount of damage as 4 tools would, so the deck can have more supporters and items to help the diverse deck thrive. With that said, there's still 11 tools in the deck, so here's the rundown. Defiance Band, which does an additional 30 damage to your opponent's active Pokemon if you have more prize cards remaining than them. Counter Gain, which provides an additional colorless energy to any Pokemon it's attached to if you have more prize cards remaining than your opponent. Handheld Fan, one of my favorite cards in the Pokemon TCG, because when attached to your active Pokemon, if your active Pokemon takes damage from your opponent's active Pokemon via an attack, you're allowed to move an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon to one of their bench Pokemon. So much chaos potential. Lucky Helmet, when attached to your active Pokemon, when your active Pokemon is damaged via an attack, you can draw 2 additional cards. Real quick, what do we think makes this helmet so lucky? Would you wear it? I don't think I'd wear it. Bravery Charm, which increases a basic Pokemon's HP by 50 when attached, and Brave Bangle, which does an additional 30 damage to your opponent's active EX Pokemon when attached to a non-EX Pokemon. Keep in mind the additional damage Brave Bangle and Defiance Band add are before applying weakness. Now to find these tools, I had Arven as a supporter who can search your deck for an item and a tool. To set up my bench to have the Pokemon that had advantage in the specific matches, I had Precious Trolley as my ace spec to pull out using Arven and get everything out that I needed. In case Trolley was prized, I had 3 Nest Balls, which lets me search a basic and put it onto the bench. And remember, Dome Fossil, which is what gets the Kabutops line going, is an item. So Precious Trolley wouldn't be helping to get it set up, so I'd either have to draw into it or use Arven to pull it. I also had an Earthen Vessel and 2 counter catchers, because getting my opponent's Pokemon that are actually weak to my specific Rotom types inactive is going to be vital. With 2 of each of the Rotoms and 1 each of Clefairy and Yveltal, I had 3 Night Stretchers to pull back specific Pokemon for their specific matchups. My other 3 supporters were Lillie's Determination, Iono for Hand Disruption, Boss's Order, and I had 4 Crispins to serve up some energy acceleration, searching my deck for 2 energies of 2 different energy types and attaching 1 energy for free, and putting the other in my hand. While energy type wouldn't matter for Gadget Show, specific energies is what would enable the single energy attacks on the Rotoms, which sometimes would be very necessary. So this was the Kabutops and Rotom. Talk about a wacky deck. I loved it in theory, but would I see the massive numbers I was hoping to? Already burning through a test match on Tauros, I had to make Rotom work if I wanted Kabutops to be a meta champion. And the first match opened with a bang, as I looked across at a 50 HP Pidgey with my standard electric Rotom inactive. They went first and weren't able to get any other Pokemon in play, using a Terra Orb to get Charizard, and then the crazy decision to Ultra Ball away 2 Arvens for a Pidgeotto, before passing it over to me. I drew into Precious Trolley, which made things even more insane, filling my bench up with 2 Mow Rotoms, Rotom EX to allow the double tool attach, and rounding it out with a Heat Rotom. That was a mistake, because remember what I had said earlier? In order to get Kabutops out, I'd need to save a bench space for Ancient Dome Fossil if I drew into it. Oops. I'd end up working through my hand, attaching a Handheld Fan and Grass energy to the active Rotom before using Lilies and seeing a lot of energy. Part of me had wished that I waited to attach an energy for turn so I could have already started attacking for weakness with my Rotom. But it was what it was, and I passed my opponent, who made a crazy decision to evolve up the Pidgey as predicted, then use Arven, making the Ultra Ball play last turn seem not as wild, only to pull a rare candy in TM Evo. But with no basics benched, still nothing could be done. And it went to me. I was able to attach an energy, attach some tools, and Gadget Show, dishing out 240 damage due to weakness for knockout on the match. Alright, so I had 0 indication still on how my deck would really perform, because I felt like that last match wasn't, against the highest caliber of players, to be frank. Already onto the final test match, it would prove much tougher. Up against, say it with me now, Terra Charizard. Only it took me a little bit to realize that's even what I was up against, because starting in active was a single Darumaka. Not Ends, just Darumaka. And I was kicking myself for feeling that Wash Rotom wouldn't see enough play when I was staring down fire Pokemon. This time I went first, with just an energy and attach available to me. I had both Kabuto and Kabutops in hand, but without that dang fossil item, the cards were pretty much useless. My opponent worked through their cards, getting out Chi-Yu and Mew EX with only 2 cards in their hand and my options limited. I used Crispin to grab an electric energy and hit with Astonish, a simple 20 damage attack, but it taking a random card of the 2 in my opponent's hand and reshuffling it would mean that I could possibly buy myself some time to get something going. And this strategy worked, stalling my opponent and giving me another turn, but just drawing into energy again. So I Astonished again, shuffling away a Professor's Research, which should have been used on the previous turn, but okay. Also worth noting is my opponent wasn't using their Mew EX restart ability to draw their hand up to 3 cards in any of this. Why? I really have no clue. We went back and forth with their Mew EX getting built up with energy and coming up to active, only to smack me around with Astonish as well. Finally, they drew into and placed down an Artizone, letting them get their Charmander benched and me able to get out more basics, plus drawing into Lilies meant the game was about to move much faster. Not only that, but the Astonishes were building up, and with the tools I had been able to attach to my Rotoms, I was actually able to hit for a knockout here onto Mew EX to take the first 2 prizes of the game. What a crazy slow start. I do think my opponent was asleep at the wheel for the first few turns, but they did wake up eventually, and it felt like after this Mew EX knockout, there was a real match going on. With my Dome Fossil making its way into a Kabuto, the 4 times damage was about to be online, and my benched Mow Rotoms were going to have their time in the sun very soon, because Terra Charizard went online, And as I've mentioned in the past videos, the terror of it all makes Charizard a Dark-type Pokemon and weak to Grass-type. Charizard beat up my scrappy little Rotom who had just taken out Mew EX, letting me promote up Mow Rotom and Brave Bangle attached, and the TCG gods answered my prayers by letting me top deck my Kabutops. I threw the Counter Gain on, along with an energy, and was ready to attack for 600 damage. Only, I just made a blunder. I was ahead in prizes, so Counter Gain wasn't online. I was so disappointed, and then realized, okay, I could still save this. I'd used Crispin this turn to get my benched Mow Rotom rocking and rolling as well, so I just retreated out the active into that and hit for 480 damage. Not 600 sadly, but hey, 480 is still enough to take the knockout on Charizard, and that's all that matters. They returned the knockout onto Mow Rotom with their Chi-Yu, and my handheld fan that was on my Mow Rotom let me put a hilarious 4th energy on over to the bench Pidgeot. You see, earlier in the match, when Charizard came online, they opted to use Infernal Rain to attach 3 fire energy to the bench Pidgeot, since they didn't have any Charmanders in play. I'm not sure how much fire energy was in my opponent's deck, but due to that, and my handheld fan, the energy was not where they wanted it, which is why I got my next knockout pretty easily. And they got a Mega Charizard online. But even then, with no real access to energy, and a Charmeleon stuck inactive, I was able to clean up on my final prize card for the win. Kabutops turning a 70 HP Pokemon into something that can do this level of damage seemed absolutely silly. Did I dead draw there for like 4 turns? Sure. But thanks to Rotom's disruption and the eventual Kabutops 4 times damage, things heated up very quickly. Was this goofy deck really about to take it all? With this starting hand, I had my doubts, and seeing the Duskull and Monkey on the other side, something that I wasn't really prepared to counter, I was up against some stall deck that was likely set to just quickly bury my lower HP Pokemon. I had Lillie's Clefairy for active, some energy, a Lucky Helmet, and a Prayer to go off of. Going first, putting the energy and Lucky Helmet onto Lillie's Clefairy and drawing into Ancient Dome. Was this about to be a Kabutops heavy match? Hopefully. My opponent got Fighting Gong to grab an energy and locked my Lillie's Clefairy in with Maractus. The 20 damage dealing corner attack would trap my Lillie's Clefairy inactive, but I didn't super care. The nice thing is the hit let me draw 2 more cards. Nothing super useful though, aside from Heat Rotom, which meant if I benched it, there'd be enough Pokemon benched in the match for Lillie's to hit knockout on Maractus on the next turn. But with no real motivation to move things along, I just passed back to my opponent rather than swing for knockout. This left Maractus to swing at me again and let me draw into a Crispin. Not wanting Lillie's Clefairy to take too much damage, I swung for the first knockout, also triggering Maractus' ability Exploding Needles, which places 6 damage counters onto my Lillie's Clefairy. Curious what the next steps were going to be for my opponent, and they went for the rare candy into Dusknoir, popping it to knock out my benched Heat Rotom with 13 damage counters, giving my opponent their first prize and me my second. The prize card I happened to pull was Fezandipiti. Whoa, my deck has Fez? Yes. In a last-minute decision between matches, I brought the bird in. Why? Usually I leave Fezandipiti out of my single prize decks, but here, where I already had Rotom EX and Lillie's in play, I figured it was a pretty helpful card to have in. My opponent's turn ended with 70 damage dished onto Lillie's Clefairy, which enabled my Lucky Helmet again, and then top deck into Precious Trolley. I stood a legitimate chance here. Look at this hand I had to work with, but hilariously, still no Kabutops. I'm sure it'd come to me though. The other tricky thing here is due to my opponent's spread of types on their bench, I didn't really have a type advantage to be playing into here. So I just rolled with 2 Mow Rotoms, Rotom EX, and then the Fez to flip the script, giving me another prize card as I knocked out the Solrock inactive. This was really a fun matchup because I had no idea where their deck was going next. Out came another Maractus, whose 20 damage corner this time would finally be enough to take out my Lillie's Clefairy, who had really done a number on the wonky deck across from me. It gave me another 2 cards thanks to Lucky Helmet, but no Kabutops still. Where was our legend? Now for me to respond, I put Mow Rotom up top, and I had to now prioritize a hunt for tools, because to take out the 120 HP Maractus, I'd need 2 more tools attached, after the Bravery Charm and the Brave Bangle I just drew into. Before starting the search, I Night Stretchered Lillie's back to my bench, attached energy for turn, then went for the Iono, which got me a Handheld Fan. I was still 1 tool short. Script flipping? Still, nope. I'd smacked Maractus for the 90 here, but wished I was going for the knockout. As expected, Maractus swung at me, but with the Handheld Fan, I tossed the Luminous Energy onto the bench Lunatone, and now could get the knockout on Maractus. Before doing so, I got some more stuff set up, because with Maractus' ability and Vengeful Punch on it, I'd be essentially trading the Mow Rotom for Maractus knockout, which was actually really scary, because it put us both at 2 prizes, meaning if my opponent had a Blood Moon Ursaluna EX, they'd be able to put it out with just a single energy, and be able to take out either my Rotom EX or Fezandipiti EX next turn for the win. I decided to risk it all and take out the Maractus, putting us both at the 2 prizes. And my opponent did respond with a Blood Moon Ursaluna, just not the one I thought it was going to be. This Blood Moon Ursaluna came up, and without a boss's order, they got a single prize knockout, which kinda gave me the game, because the counter catchers I had in my hand were now online, along with my rebench Lillie's Clefairy. But before closing it out, I felt like I needed to do my due diligence to get the fossil of the hour, Kabutops, out. First I flipped the script, no Kabutops. I thinned out my hand and went for a Lillie's, still no Kabutops. Even though he didn't make it out, I went for the knockout on the counter catched up Fezandipiti, using Lillie's Clefairy to take my last 2 prizes, and make Kabutops a meta champion. 4 times the damage, 4 times the charm, didn't want to show up in the final match. But hey, he didn't need to show up because this deck is a meta champion. The deck is definitely a meta champion, but stay tuned to my ratings before you make it out of your bulk and bring it to your next cup. For a fun factor, I'd give it a 6 out of 10. Rotom on its own is a fun deck to play, albeit super glass cannon, and the idea of combining it with Kabutops is a really fun concept. We did have the Charizard takedown, which made it all worth it. I'm just not so sure how often all of these components will actually come together to get those big numbers out. For flow factor, it's also a 6 out of 10. With no real natural card draw built in, it certainly has a place to fall flat. And for win equity, I'm gonna also go with a 6 out of 10. The deck covers a lot of popular type weaknesses. It's a gimmick deck though, and I don't see it doing significantly well against any of the top decks at the moment, giving this deck an average and consistent score of 6 out of 10. Kabutops meets Rotom was the rom-com we needed to start the year off with. Let's see if we have more gimmick decks on the horizon, or if I'm going to be tryharding next week. Oh gosh, this is like low-key a bad card, like really not a great card. What I'm gonna do with this, I have no idea. I'll figure it out though. Next time on the 825 Deck Challenge.